Dear brothers, happy Wednesday. What's up, boys? Before we get rolling today, I'm going to ask you guys a little bit of a favor, if you will. So in the description, you're going to see this little link. So we are on, what's today? Episode 78, which is awesome. And this has been a great, I've loved every second of doing this. It's been awesome. And it's something that I want to obviously continue to do for the long haul, and have had a ton of support from you guys, and I'm just so grateful for that. But in the description, there is a link for a little Patreon type page. So if you guys are finding this to be, something that you really enjoy, I would super appreciate if you would consider, sending a donation, if you will, being a patron of this show, be it monthly, be it one time, doesn't matter. All of that just allows me to continue with making the show and the time it takes to put some of this stuff together. And so in the event that you feel giving on this Wednesday, we'll call it Giving Wednesday, I would super appreciate that. Link is down there. This show is always going to be free to all of you, but if you guys want to support the show more, support me and the family more, I would greatly appreciate it, because it just allows me to do this more effectively, and I put a lot of effort into these episodes and the research to it, and I want to continue to make it as good as I can for all of you guys. And that obviously comes at a cost, and so any help is always appreciated, and I'll leave it at that for today. But today, our topic, we're going to call it the great yogurt debate. One of the questions I get a lot is, what is the best yogurt to have, especially from like a protein perspective? And so I'm going to break down 3 yogurts today: Ratio, Chobani, and Oikos. And we're going to talk through what I like, what I don't like, and also my own personal glucose monitor responses from my Libre 3. So I wear a glucose monitor, have been for a few months. It's just a way that I can kind of keep track, and I've also been doing some science experiments of my own on, what spikes my glucose the most, what doesn't, what helps to dull that or dampen the effect of sugar on my body. And so I want to go through all 3 of these today and tell you exactly what my favorite pick is for the king of the Greek yogurt protein snacks, if you will. So let's start with Ratio. So Ratio is somewhat newish, but they are the highest protein content of the 3 that I have talked about. So Ratio protein is anywhere from 23 to 28 grams of protein per little 3.5 ounce, container, which is what I normally get. 4 grams of sugar, 4.5 grams of fat, 9 grams of carbs total. Ingredients are non-fat milk, whey protein, and then less than 2% of sunflower oil, erythritol, natural flavor, carrageenan, and sucralose. So erythritol is a sugar alcohol, which is not overly loved. There is some issues associated with it that they've seen in research. I think a lot of it is still kind of up in the air. It's not an uncommon thing, but it is a sweetener that seems to be used a lot. Sucralose is a synthetic sweetener that's added to that. So sucralose is something that I typically tell people to avoid as much as they can. Just because, again, it's kind of a synthetic way of sweetening something. It's not a natural product, but it's extremely common. I'm not stressing about it overly much, but it is one of the ingredients. And then carrageenan is an additive that they use to thicken foods and preserve foods. It comes from like a red seaweed. So, there's, again, the data on that is a little bit up in the air in terms of if it's great or terrible or bad for you or what have you. So I won't worry about that too much. However, so that Ratio protein, you're getting the most amount of protein, 25 to 28 grams per container, depending on like the flavor you get and what have you. And when I took that yogurt, it brought my glucose up to about 121. That's where it capped out at. And these are, I haven't eaten anything. It's the first thing that I eat. I haven't had anything to dull it. It's just taking it. So I went up to about 121. That was the highest. And I did this 3 times, and I was 121, 123, and 119. So 121 is kind of in that middle range, but that's what my glucose went up to relatively quickly and then came back down. In terms of taste, flavor, I think that the ratio has the most, it's a very thick custardy type yogurt, so it doesn't have that kind of softer taste that like Chobani and Oikos do. So it doesn't really have that feeling of traditional yogurt. It is a lot thicker, and I do think that it has a little bit more of a chemically type flavor. Again, this is me, this is subjective, but that was kind of my takeaways from ratio. I do love the fact that there's so much protein in it. You know, all of these, well, excuse me, anything north of 20 grams is kind of always what we're looking for. And, you know, obviously this is north of that. You're getting up to 28, I think, with the vanilla one. And so that's great. You know, for people that are looking to get a little bit more protein in, I have found that some of my friends really like the flavor of it more than others. For me, it's just not my absolute favorite flavor, but overall, it's tough to beat 28 grams of protein. And I do like that they've got a few different flavors. So let's move on to Chobani. So that's kind of the biggest name in the yogurt world, or it has been for a lot of years now. You know, Dannon once upon a time was the big dog, and then Chobani just took over. So in Chobani, there are 11 grams of protein, obviously far lower than what we just discussed with ratio. No grams of fat. There's 15 grams of carbs and 14 grams of sugar, 9 grams of which are added sugar. Ingredients: non-fat milk, cane sugar being the second ingredient, water, fruit pectin, natural flavors, guar gum, locust bean gum, which essentially you're just looking at things that help to make things a little bit harder. It's kind of a thickening agent, if you will. It's like a gum. It helps to thicken stuff. Again, the data on it in terms of like lots of it is kind of meh, but again, nothing crazy. Fruit and vegetable juice kind of gives it its color, lemon juice concentrate, and that's kind of the end of that ingredient list. So obviously no added whey protein concentrate like that you saw in ratio. Chobani obviously has a metric ton of flavors, and so as a whole it actually is very good tasting yogurt, in my opinion. I think Chobani is delicious. But my blood glucose spiked to 155 all 3 times that I took in Chobani yogurt. Super high. I try not to go much above 120 most of the time if I can. 155 is pretty high. That's actually setting off the alarm on my Libre 3 for me. So obviously, as you noted, there's a lot of added sugar into Chobani, which is one of the reasons that it probably tastes better, but it is the biggest spike in terms of glucose. On top of that, it is the least amount of protein of these 3. 11 grams is not a lot. You would actually need to eat 2 of these to get to that 20 gram threshold that we typically look for, unless you added it with something else that also had protein in it. So as a standalone, it's not a great protein source. It's not bad, but again, if you also had 2 of those, that would also double everything else, including the sugars, which really isn't ideal. But again, flavors are good. It tastes like regular yogurt. Obviously, it's very good because there's more sugar added to it. So that plays a pretty substantial role. But there's, you know, no grams of fat, which some people look for, which can be a plus or minus depending on what kind of, you know, diet you're on. But still, again, not a massive favorite of mine, mostly because of what my glucose did. So that's Chobani. Last but not least is Oikos Pro. So Oikos Pro is also relatively new. They've had their regular Oikos, which you can buy at Costco, which I do all the time. But the Oikos Pro has 20 grams of protein, 3 grams of fat, 8 grams of carbs. Total sugars is 3 grams, but there's no added sugar in Oikos Pro. Ingredients are non-fat milk, water, whey protein concentrate, natural flavors, cream, and then less than 1% of tapioca starch, lemon juice concentrate, stevia leaf Reb M, which is just kind of a natural molecule found in the stevia leaf, which is just naturally sweet, and potassium sorbate and vitamin D3. So taste-wise, I like Oikos Pro a lot. I like all of them. They're all delicious to me, strawberry, and I mostly do. I like vanilla. Vanilla is my favorite personally. From a blood glucose perspective, my blood glucose does not move with Oikos Pro, and it moves even less with regular Oikos, which is only 15 grams of protein. That's 000 for the Oikos, the regular Oikos. But for the Pro, there's a little bit more, a touch more carb in it, I believe, and there is a little bit more fat. There's no fat in the regular one. But my blood glucose doesn't move, stays at around 95. So no matter where which is still below 100, which is typically where I kind of am resting at. But it didn't move really with all 3 times that I tested it out. Now, maybe I would need another 5 or 6 times with all of these to really get a bigger plethora of data, but that's just over the last couple of months of testing it out. So ratio, highest protein content of all of them. The flavor can be a little bit meh, if you will. I also don't love the fact that it's got erythritol and sucralose in it, and sunflower oil for that matter. There's just a lot of, that's just extra ingredients that I don't think are necessary. And again, my flavor for it's not great, but some people that I've met have really liked it. Chobani, really low protein, 11 grams of protein. It's just not, it's really not up to snuff. You'd have to double that. Worse than that is all of the added sugar. It may taste good, but it spiked my blood glucose the most. And so I do not eat Chobani at all, for that matter. It's my least favorite of all 3. And there's also, you know, it's got the guar gums in it, locust bean gum. It's kind of meh in terms of ingredients. It's the cane sugar and the sugar content totally that's bothersome. Again, is that always a bad thing? No. Like right after a workout, there's nothing wrong with that because maybe you have to replace what you've lost. But it's also going to be a blunted response because exercise affects how glucose rises in your body. Then there's Oikos Pro, which has the second most protein at 20 grams. There's no added sugar. I also like the ingredient list the most of all 3. The sweetener is stevia leaf, which is a natural sweetener, which I don't really have a whole lot of problems with, and I haven't seen any research or data that shows anything really wrong with it. It also did nothing to my blood glucose, which makes a big difference when you're picking a protein because, you know, we do want to avoid massive glycemic changes constantly. And so this does that, and I think it tastes just as good pretty much as the rest of them. It's obviously not as sweet as Chobani, but that's perfectly okay with me. I like the vanilla one again the most. So of the 3, if I had to pick one, I'm picking Oikos Pro every day, all day, twice on Sunday. I certainly wouldn't say no to ratio. It's just not my favorite taste, so it's not my number 1, and I would completely get rid of Chobani almost entirely. It's not my favorite. I don't think it moves the needle in the right direction. You have to double it to get the right dose of protein most of the time. I just don't think that's a good option. I think that you're better off going with Oikos for essentially the same cost range, and you get way more out of it. You get more protein, you get less of a glycemic response, and it tastes good. So that's really the yogurt debate right there. I think Oikos is the best way to go. Certainly wouldn't be upset if people are picking ratio by any stretch of the imagination, but I would not pick Chobani in any way. Also, elite move that you can do with protein that I do with my protein. A lot of people like putting granola in, or they like putting something in to make it crunchy or what have you. So that's great, but again, it's granola, and if you're trying to limit how much of that glycemic response you have, granola is not going to be the thing that does that the best. So what I do is I take my protein bars. I really like the Kirkland protein bars from Costco, but there's a billion ones that you could have. And what I do is I break it up into little pieces and I throw it into my yogurt. So that in and of itself adds another 20-ish grams of protein with almost no extra sugar or carbohydrate to it. And again, I don't really have any response, and I just got, 41 to 45 grams of protein in basically a little snack with, not a huge caloric, surplus that I gained from it. So that's a beautiful thing. It's a great trick to try. And that pretty much ends my little rant on yogurts. I'll continue to test them out. Drop some comments below. Let me know what you guys like, don't like. If there's some other ones that you'd like to see me test out, I'm happy to do it. It's fun to do all these little science experiments. But at the end of the day, stick with Oikos, stick with ratio, kick Chobani to the curb. And that's about it. Have an awesome Wednesday. I love you all. God bless. Be strong. go eat some delicious yogurt, boys. We'll see you.